Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're heading into some really high altitude territory.
Well, you really are.
Yeah, we're unpacking a story that on the surface, it sounds like a standard superhero origin. But when you actually peel back the layers of the source material we're looking at today, it's this incredibly gritty, emotional survival thriller about family
Mm.
and well, birds.
It is certainly a unique combination. We are looking at a substantial stack of materials revolving around the Angel experiment, which is the first entry in the Maximum Ride archives. And I think superhero is almost the wrong word for it entirely.
Right, because superhero implies choice.
Exactly. It implies choice. It implies a costume, maybe a strong moral crusade from the jump. This is much more about biology. It's about raw survival.
Maximum Ride. I mean, even the name just sounds fast. But before we get into the action, and trust me, for you listening, there's a lot of action to cover today. We really have to talk about the core premise here, the hook.
The hook is everything.
Right, and it all comes down to this tiny, tiny percentage, just 2%.
Precisely. The source material posits a fascinating, if terrifying, genetic scenario. You have these 6 subjects. Children, really. They range from age 6 to 14.
Just kids.
Just kids. And they appear, for all intents and purposes, to be human. They talk, they laugh, they bicker about who ate the last cookie.
Yeah.
But genetically, they are 98% human and 2% avian.
Avian. Like birds. Now, hold on, because 2% does not sound like a lot. I mean, we share what, like 50% of our DNA with bananas?
Something like that, yes.
So how does a measly 2% grant functional flight? Because we aren't talking about, a few feathers in their hair or whatever. We are talking full-on wings.
That is the brilliance and, frankly, the horror of the engineering described in the text.
Well,
That 2% isn't just random filler DNA. It is targeted exclusively at the musculoskeletal system and respiratory efficiency.
okay.
To get a human-sized mammal off the ground, you can't just glue wings to their back. The physics simply don't work. Gravity is a harsh mistress.
So unpack the physics for me here. Because Max, who is the leader of this group, she has a 13-foot wingspan.
That's right.
That is wider than a Volkswagen Beetle is long.
It is massive.
Yeah.
And to articulate wings of that size, to actually flap them with enough force to generate lift, you need massive pectoral muscles.
Which weigh a lot.
Exactly. Muscle is incredibly heavy. So the 2% avian DNA fundamentally alters their bone density. They have hollow bones.
Oh, wow. Like an actual bird.
Very similar to a bird's lattice structure. It's strong like carbon fiber, but incredibly light. And beyond that, they have specialized air sac.
Air sacs.
Yeah, so normal human breathes in and out. It's a two-way street. But a bird, and by extension these kids, has a continuous one-way flow of oxygen. They constantly have fresh oxygen moving through their system.
Which I guess they'd need if they're flying high up.
They desperately need that efficiency to function at 10,000 feet without passing out from hypoxia.
Man, that sounds exhausting. Just imagining the caloric intake you would need to get that kind of frame off the ground. I mean, it makes me hungry just thinking about it.
And that is actually a major recurring plot point we see in the sources. They are constantly starving
Right, they're always looking for food.
because their metabolism is running hot, like a furnace, just to support that extreme physiology. They aren't just hungry teenagers going through a growth spurt. They are biologically on the brink of starvation almost all the time.
So let's set the context for you guys listening. These kids, they weren't bitten by radioactive spiders. They weren't born on krypton. They were manufactured.
Correct. They are recombinant life forms, created in a lab.
And the lab has a name, right?
It's called the school, which, by the way, has to be the most ominous, sterile name for a house of horrors I have ever encountered in our deep dive.
Oh, absolutely. It's not, the Institute for Better Living or something sci-fi sounding. It's just the school.
And it functions like a prison. Or worse, a vivisection lab. The sources mentioned they were kept in literal dog crates.
Dog crates. Just brutal.
They were experiments. The scientists referred to them as IT, or by subject numbers. So when we meet them in the source material, they aren't out fighting crime in the streets.
No, they're fugitives.
Exactly. They're runaways. They're hiding in the mountains, just trying to stay free.
And that really sets the tone for this whole thing. This isn't about saving the world, at least not yet. It is literally just about not getting put back in a cage.
Survival in its purest form.
So let's meet this group. They call themselves the flock. Not a team, a flock. And at the center of it all is Max. Maximum Ride.
Max is 14 years old. She is the leader, the surrogate mother, and the tactician all rolled into one highly stressed teenager.
Highly stressed is an understatement.
Truly. And what stands out in the narrative voice, because we are hearing this largely from her perspective, is the crushing weight of that responsibility.
Yeah.
She isn't just a teenager trying to figure herself out. She is responsible for keeping 5 other lives safe from people who actively want to capture and dissect them. Psychologically, this is a textbook case of parentification.
Let's expand on that. Parentification.
It's when a child is forced to take on the role of an adult, usually a parent, due to the absence or incapacity of the actual caregivers.
Because they don't have anyone else.
Exactly. Max has no childhood because she has to be the mother to 5 other kids.
Yeah.
So she's sarcastic, she snaps at people, she threatens to beat them up.
She's got that tough girl armor.
Very thick armor. But underneath it, she is terrified. Every single decision she makes is quite literally life or death for her family.
Then you have Fang. He's the same age as Max, also 14. And if Max is all this noise and fury and constant motion, Fang is, well, he's the void.
Fang is the pragmatist, the stoic of the group. He barely speaks, but when he does, everyone stops and listens.
The strong, silent type.
Very much so. He represents the logical counterbalance to Max's instinctual, fiery leadership. While Max is reacting emotionally to threats, Fang is observing patterns.
Right. He's the one who figures out the flight mechanics.
He is. He tracks the local hawks to learn aerodynamics. He studies the wind currents. He's highly analytical.
Then there's Iggy. And this part really got to me when reading the material. Iggy is 14, he's blind, and he is the group's explosives expert.
The irony there is incredibly tragic, but it also perfectly highlights the sheer cruelty of the school. The source material explicitly mentions that the scientists tried to enhance his night vision.
They were just tinkering with him.
Yes, they tampered with the rods and cones in his eyes. The experiment was a catastrophic failure. Instead of supersight, it left him with white scars on his retinas and permanent blindness.
But because of that, his other senses are just dialed up to 11.
Exactly. This is neuroplasticity in intense action. Because his visual cortex is dark, his brain has aggressively reallocated that processing power to hearing and touch.
So he can, like, hear a car engine miles away.
Miles away. And he can identify the make and model just from the engine block's vibration. He can identify people by the specific rhythm of their footsteps or their breathing.
And as I mentioned, he has this crazy knack for chemistry. He builds bombs by feel, which is terrifying and awesome.
Highly resourceful.
So moving down the age bracket, we have Nudge. She's 11. And the rest of the flock calls her the Nudge Channel because it is all Nudge, all the time. She just does not stop talking.
Nudge represents the flock's desperate tether to the normal world. While Max and Fang are hyper-focused on raw survival, Nudge obsesses over clothes, over hair, and mostly over parents.
She wants to be a regular kid.
She deeply desires that connection to humanity that the school tried so hard to strip away from them. She's the most vocal about wondering who her biological parents are.
And the talking.
The talking is a defense mechanism. She fills the silence because to her, the silence is terrifying. It means they're alone.
That makes a lot of sense. Then we have the biological siblings, the only 2 in the flock who are actually related by blood. First is the Gasman, who's 8.
A rather colorful nickname derived from a specific digestive quirk.
Which is a very polite way of saying the kid has terrible gas.
Indeed.
But he also has this incredible mimicry ability, right?
Yes, he can replicate voices and sounds.
It's like the parrot, but better.
Much better. It's a massive tactical advantage. He can sound like a rock slide falling down the mountain or a police siren approaching. Though, being an 8-year-old boy, he mostly uses it for elaborate pranks.
Naturally. And finally, we have the heart of the story, Angel.
Angel is 6 years old. She looks like a little cherub. Curly blonde hair, totally innocent appearance. But she is arguably the most powerful and potentially the most dangerous member of the entire group.
She's a telepath. She can read minds. And for you listening, we're not just talking about party tricks like, oh, I know what number you're thinking of. We are talking deep, invasive dives into people's psyches.
And throughout this deep dive, we're going to see that ability rapidly evolve. She is the emotional core, the absolute baby of the family, but she is also the catalyst for everything that happens in the narrative.
So, here is our mission statement for today. We aren't just going to recount the plot of these files, we're going to unpack the survival dynamics of this completely unique family unit.
We'll look at the ethics, or the total lack thereof, regarding their creation.
Exactly, and we're going to follow them from their peaceful hideout in the mountains straight back into the belly of the beast.
Because that is where the story truly begins. with a sudden, violent disruption of their peace.
Right. Let's set the scene for a minute. They are living in this house shaped like a sideways E, perched on a cliff high in the mountains. There are no adults anywhere.
They did have a guardian once.
Yeah, a guy named Jeb Batchelder. But he disappeared 2 years ago. The flock thinks he's dead, eaten by wolves, or maybe he fell off a cliff. So it's just the kids. Max is cooking badly, Nudge is sleeping in. It all feels so normal, domestic.
It is a very fragile domesticity. They are essentially playing house, pretending to be safe, but the cold reality is they are actively being hunted.
And the hunters are terrifying. They're called the Erasers.
Erasers, another brutal utilitarian name from the school. These are the antagonists, half-human, half-wolf hybrids.
Right, they're the enforcers. And biologically speaking, they are fascinating in a really gruesome way.
They are, unlike the flock, whose mutations are quite elegant and highly internal, the hollow bones, the air sacs. The erasers are brute force hybrids.
They're just muscle and teeth.
They're bred exclusively for strength, aggression, and blind loyalty.
And they have this morphing capability. They look like regular guys, maybe a bit rough around the edges, but human, and then just snap fangs and fur.
Correct. But let's analyze the biology of that morphing process. That would be an incredibly energy-expensive biological mechanism.
Because they're physically changing their shape.
Yes, rearranging facial bone structure, extending a heavy muzzle, growing thick fur instantaneously. That requires massive, unsustainable metabolic energy.
Which explains a lot about them.
It explains why the erasers are so highly unstable.
Unstable how? Like mentally?
Both mentally and physically. They age phenomenally fast. They go from an infant to a fully grown adult weapon in about 4 years.
4 years? That's insane.
They have a strict shelf life. It is planned obsolescence on a biological level. The school didn't design them to live long, happy lives. They designed them to be weapons that expire before they can ever develop the cognitive maturity to rebel.
That makes the attack scene even scarier. So here is the inciting incident. The erasers drop out of the sky, literally out of nowhere. A helicopter appears over their hidden house, and these wolfmen rappel down.
It's an ambush.
It's an all-out brawl. The flock fights back hard. Max is doing roundhouse kicks. Fang is throwing punches. But they are just completely outnumbered.
And outgunned. The erasers have modern technology and sheer numbers on their side. The flock only has their own bodies.
And in all that chaos, the erasers achieve their main objective. They grab Angel.
Which is a devastating psychological blow to the group.
This scene is just heartbreaking to read. They literally shove a 6-year-old girl into a sack, a rough canvas sack. And Max, who views herself as the ultimate protector, is pinned down. She has to watch them fly away with her baby sister.
And in that moment of acute trauma, there is a twist that drives the knife even deeper for Max.
Oh, man, yeah. She recognizes one of the erasers.
She recognizes Ari.
Ari, who was Jeb's son.
Exactly. The last time Max saw Ari, he was a little boy. A sweet 7-year-old kid who used to follow her around the compound, drawing pictures with crayons.
And now, just 4 years later, because of that rapid aging you mentioned, he is a fully grown, monstrous eraser.
That realization brings home the true horror of the school. They didn't just casually experiment on random subjects like the flock. They experimented on their own children.
Right. Jeb was a scientist there, and his own kid got turned into a monster.
Ari isn't just a mindless beast. He's a victim who is forced to become a monster.
It creates this incredibly complex psychological dynamic for Max. She hates him, obviously, for taking Angel, but she remembers him as this little brother figure.
It humanizes the enemy in a way that makes it infinitely harder to fight them. It complicates that straightforward good versus evil narrative right from the very beginning.
But fight they must. Angel is gone. She's been taken back to the school in California. And this leads to the big tactical split for the flock. Max decides they have to go get her. But they can't all go.
This is the Maxocracy in action. Max has to make the hard, unpopular call.
She decides that she, Fang, and Nudge will fly to rescue Angel. But Iggy and the Gasmen have to stay behind at the ruined house.
And Iggy is furious about this decision. He feels marginalized. He feels like he's being sidelined purely because he's blind.
And honestly, reading it, I get it. It feels a bit ableist on the surface. Like, oh, you can't see, so you stay home with the 8-year-old.
It is a completely valid emotional response from Iggy. But let's look at the cold tactical reality that Max is operating under.
Right, she's the general.
Exactly. A high-speed, long-distance aerial rescue mission into a heavily fortified, familiar enemy facility is incredibly dangerous for anyone.
Even with perfect vision.
Without sight. Iggy would be at a severe disadvantage in an unfamiliar, highly chaotic, three-dimensional combat environment. Max isn't being cruel here. She's mitigating risk to keep him alive.
But leaving them behind actually creates its own amazing narrative arc, because we essentially get three separate survival stories running in parallel from here.
We do, and they're all fascinating case studies in resilience.
Let's unpack those. Let's start with the home front, narrative A, with Iggy and the gas man. Max leaves them behind to be quote-unquote safe, but safe is a very relative term when you're a mutant fugitive.
Precisely. The Erasers know exactly where the house is now. They have been there once to take Angel. They will inevitably come back to finish the job.
So Iggy and the gas man, they realize they can't just hide under the bed and wait for Mom to come home. They have to defend their territory.
They have to become combatants.
This is where we see that the flock isn't just physically strong. They are incredibly smart. These two kids turn their home into a literal death trap. It's like Home Alone, but with lethal intent.
They perfectly utilize the limited resources they have. They don't have firearms, so they use chemistry and physics. Take the oil trap, for instance.
Right, they take all this cooking oil from the pantry and spread it across the steep dirt road leading up to the house.
But think about the complex tactical mind required to execute that effectively. Iggy cannot see the terrain.
He has to map it in his head.
He has to rely entirely on the gasman's verbal descriptions and his own physical memory of the landscape to create a functional kill zone.
Wow.
Using the cooking oil isn't just a juvenile prank. It is applied fluid dynamics. They calculate the exact slope of the driveway to ensure maximum viscosity and slippage right at the critical hairpin turn.
So when the Erasers come speeding up in their Hummer,
It turns their own kinetic momentum against them. They lose traction entirely. It's basically Sun Tzu for kindergartners.
I love that. Sun Tzu for kindergartners. And then, of course, there is Big Boy.
Big Boy, the improvised explosive device that Iggy constructs.
And this isn't a firecracker. This is a massive bomb. How does a blind 14-year-old build a functional, highly volatile bomb without blowing his own hands off?
By acute touch and smell. He can differentiate wires by their subtle textures or by having the gasman describe the color coding.
That requires so much trust between those two.
Absolute trust. Furthermore, he knows the precise chemical composition of basic household cleaners and agricultural fertilizers. It speaks to his extraordinary sensory precision.
He's literally visualizing the chemical reaction in his dark mind.
They are preparing for a full-scale siege.
And the siege definitely comes. The Erasers return, madder than ever. And this leads to one of the most poignant symbolic moments in the early story. The boys realize they can't save the house. They can't hold it.
No. They realize that to escape with their lives, they have to destroy the very thing they are defending.
They lure the Erasers inside and they detonate Big Boy. The cabin, that E shape on the cliff, their sanctuary for the last 4 years, it is just incinerated.
Blown to pieces.
And that hits hard as a reader. That house was the only place they were ever truly free. Burning it down is like admitting that that part of their life, that childhood, is over forever. They can never go back.
It forces an instantaneous maturation. They are no longer children playing house in the woods. They are now active soldiers in a war.
And they survive. They turn their supposed disabilities, blindness and youth, into massive tactical advantages. They use sound, they use Gazzy's mimicry to confuse the Erasers, they use the element of surprise.
It is a profound demonstration of adaptability and resilience.
Okay, meanwhile, we have narrative B happening. The road trip, the air trip, with Nudge and Fang. And Max is there too initially, but they end up splitting up because Nudge is having a major identity crisis.
Nudge is the character who most deeply yearns for a conventional identity. Before they left the cave near the ruined house, she found a clue in Jeb's old hidden files.
Right, a name and a place. Monique in Tepisco, Arizona.
And since they have to fly directly over Arizona anyway to get to the school in California, she aggressively insists on making a detour.
And Fang, who is usually Mr. Mission-oriented, no-nonsense Fang, he actually agrees with her. He backs her up against Max. Why do you think he does that? It seems completely out of character for him to delay a vital rescue mission for what is probably a wild goose chase.
I think Fang actually possesses a remarkably high degree of emotional intelligence that he deliberately hides behind his silence.
Interesting.
He sees that Nudge is desperate. She is fracturing mentally. Even though he is stoic, he has a deep, unwavering loyalty to the psychological well-being of the flock.
He knows she needs this.
He knows she has to see this through, even if it's a dead end. If he denies her this chance, she might resent the mission and become a liability. If he lets her go, she gets the closure she needs to focus.
So they go to Tepisco. They find the exact address from the file. And Nudge actually sees a woman who looks like she could be her mother. She's just watching from the bushes, terrified, but so hopeful. It's this agonizing moment of being so close yet so far away, and then, of course, ambush.
The erasers are always one step behind them.
Ari shows up again.
And this is a crucial fight scene because it beautifully illustrates Nudge's character growth. She isn't just the helpless motormouth here. When Fang is getting beaten, and beaten quite badly by multiple erasers, Nudge steps up.
She fights back with a can of spray paint. She literally blinds Ari with bright green spray paint to the eyes. It's resourceful, sure, but it also feels so incredibly desperate.
It is an act of pure desperation. But the ultimate takeaway from this Arizona detour is entirely emotional.
Because Nudge doesn't actually get to meet her mother.
She doesn't. She barely survives the physical encounter. But in that violence, she realizes that her idealized fantasy of a biological family is exactly that, a fantasy.
It's not real.
Her real family is the boy bleeding on the ground next to her and the girl flying ahead of her. It is a classic found family realization. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.
Man, that is powerful. Which brings us to narrative C. Max's solo journey. Because, of course, Max gets separated from Fang and Nudge during this whole detour debate. And why? Because she tries to save someone else entirely.
This is what Jeb later identifies as Max's fatal flaw. She fundamentally cannot walk past someone who is in trouble.
She has a hero complex. She's flying along, and she sees a girl on the ground, a normal girl named Ella, being harassed and bullied by some older boys. And these boys happen to have shotguns, so Max intervenes.
And she pays a heavy price for that intervention. She gets shot, a shotgun blast directly to her wing.
This injury completely grounds her. Literally, she cannot fly. She's in massive pain, she's bleeding out, and she is totally vulnerable. And this forces her into a situation that she has actively avoided for 4 solid years.
She has to trust a stranger.
She ends up at Ella's house. And by some crazy luck of the draw, Ella's mom is Dr. Martinez, who happens to be a veterinarian.
Which is a perfect slice of irony, considering Max is 2% bird.
Right. But Dr. Martinez represents the exact antithesis of everything at the school. The school treats these children as its ferrets, as disposable lab rats. Dr. Martinez treats Max as a person in desperate need of help.
She provides competent medical care, she provides hot food, and she provides a safe, soft bed.
The cookies. We have to mention the chocolate chip cookies here. Max has this quiet moment of pure, unadulterated bliss, just eating warm cookies with milk.
It brilliantly highlights how utterly deprived she has been her entire life.
She's never had a childhood. She's never just been a kid eating a cookie. It's almost sadder than all the brutal fighting scenes.
It is profoundly sad. It shows us exactly what she has lost. But this brief stay with Dr. Martinez also yields a critical piece of exposition that fundamentally changes the genre of the story.
Yes. Dr. Martinez takes an X-ray of Max's wing to check for broken hollow bones, and she finds something else entirely.
A microchip.
A microchip deeply embedded in Max's arm. Dr. Martinez actually recognizes it because she uses similar, though less advanced, chips for tracking expensive pets.
It is a tracking device.
This is a massive aha moment for the reader and for Max. Max has been agonizing over how the erasers always seem to find them. How did they find the secret house? How did they find Nudge in Tepisco? It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't coincidence.
It's the chip. They are tagged.
It changes the entire context of their supposed freedom. Think about the implications of that for a second. They were never really lost. The school always knew exactly where they were.
They were just letting them run, like free-range chickens prior to slaughter.
It implies that their daring escape 4 years ago might have been intentionally allowed, or at the very least closely monitored the entire time.
That is a chilling thought. It means their entire grueling life of freedom was a carefully constructed illusion, a controlled experiment functioning in the wild.
But Max doesn't even have the luxury of time to process this massive psychological trauma because she still has to get to Angel. She leaves Ella and Dr. Martinez, which is incredibly hard for her because she essentially leaves the only true mother figure she's ever experienced.
She leaves to protect them from the erasers that are surely following her track.
Exactly. And she gets back in the air, broken wing and all.
Which finally leads to the regrouping. The fragmented flock, minus Angel, manages to reunite at Lake Mead.
This reunion is sweet, but it is also incredibly frantic. They are all starving, they're exhausted, and they desperately need wheels. Max knows she can't fly the rest of the way to California with her injured wing. So we get the heist.
The ATM scene.
Yes, this adds a much-needed layer of levity to the tension, but it also sharply highlights their complete outsider status in the normal world. They don't have debit cards, they don't have IDs.
So they have to hack a physical ATM.
They use Iggy's hypersensitive hearing to listen to the mechanical tumblers and the electronic tones to force it to dispense cash. It's a bank robbery, strictly speaking.
Out of sheer necessity.
And then with the cash, they steal a van. Well, they quote-unquote borrow it. And let's just say the genetic engineering at the school did not include driver's education.
Max's driving is absolutely catastrophic.
She is a menace behind the wheel. It's this great moment of humor that reminds the audience that, yes, they are effectively highly trained superheroes, but they're also just kids who have never driven a car before.
And they crash, inevitably.
Right into the dirt. And this crash leads directly to their capture. They are surrounded.
So despite all the fierce fighting, all the endless running, all the clever traps and tricks, they end up exactly where they dreaded most. Back at the school.
Straight into the belly of the beast. The description of the school in the source material here is so vital to the tone. It smells strongly of antiseptic chemicals and raw fear.
They are immediately put back into the dog crates. It is designed to be utterly dehumanizing. They are stripped of their chosen names and referred to merely as subjects once again.
It's a brutal return to their original trauma point.
But there is a silver lining. They finally locate Angel.
But Angel has changed. She hasn't just been sitting in a cage crying this whole time.
Not at all. The scientists have been relentlessly running her through complex physical mazes, testing her spatial intelligence. But Angel has actually been testing them right back.
Because she realizes that her mind-reading ability has spiked massively under the extreme stress.
Yes, she can clearly read the researcher's specific thoughts now. She learns to navigate the impossible mazes, not by running and guessing, but by plucking the correct route directly from the observing scientists' minds.
That is just such a massive power move from a 6-year-old. It's like, I'm not solving your little puzzle, I'm just reading your answer key.
Exactly. It proves that the school's harsh experiments are actually working far too well. The subjects are actively outsmarting the highly educated testers.
But the most devastating revelation at the school isn't the cages or the trackers or the mazes. It is the man in the white tote. Max is sitting in her cramped cage, just waiting for the physical torture to begin, and casually strolling in is Jeb Batchelder, the man who supposedly saved them, the man they violently mourned for 2 solid years.
He is very much alive.
He is alive, he is wearing a pristine white lab coat, and he is the one giving the cruel orders.
This betrayal is visceral for Max. She trusted him completely with her life. She loved him like a father.
And he stands there outside her cage and tells her, what? That all of this was just a test?
That is exactly his claim. He calmly tells Max that everything they endured, the initial escape, the years of freezing in the wild, the constant hunger, the brutal eraser attacks, he says it was all part of a grand orchestrated experiment to toughen them up, to prepare them.
That sounds like textbook gaslighting to me. It's that classic abusive logic of, I only hurt you for your own good.
It certainly perfectly fits the psychological profile of an abuser attempting to rationalize their horrific actions to their victim. But let's also look at it from a cold scientific perspective, albeit a highly unethical one.
Okay, lay it on me.
If you were an architect trying to artificially create the ultimate survivor, you can't just train them in a safe, padded gym.
Right.
You have to expose them to genuine, life-threatening danger to force evolutionary adaptation. Jeb claims he was closely monitoring them via the microchips the entire time. But then, he drops an even bigger bombshell.
The destiny reveal.
Yes. He tells Mac that she wasn't just created to be a neat scientific oddity. She was created for a highly specific purpose. He looks at her and says, "You were supposed to save the world."
Save the world. From what exactly?
He deliberately refuses to say. But he insists that this monumental task is her absolute destiny. It completely reframes the narrative scope. Are they just tragic genetic freaks, or are they a specifically designed solution to a massive coming problem?
Max, to her immense credit, does not buy a single word of his manipulative speech. She doesn't just melt into his arms and call him dad. She puts up a massive emotional wall.
She effectively says, "I don't care about your grand plans or your tests. I'm getting my family out of this room right now."
Which launches us right into the climax, the breakout. And this is where the dynamic of the flock truly shines as a cohesive military unit. They aren't just scrambling to escape, they are coordinating.
Max completely gives in to her primal instincts. She attacks Ari through the cage bars. And she bites him. I mean, she really tears into him.
It's savage, it's so animalistic, but it absolutely works. It shocks him enough to break the stalemate.
And right at that critical moment, the cavalry finally arrives.
But it's not the police coming to raid the lab. It's Iggy and the gas man.
They managed to track them all the way from the desert. And they didn't come alone.
No, they brought friends. Very angry friends.
They purposefully released the other avian test subjects held at the facility. Specifically, a massive, aggressive flock of actual predatory hawks.
This is such a brilliant callback to earlier in the story when Fang and Nudge were hanging out in the desert communicating with the local hawks. They established a baseline connection. Now, that deep natural connection pays off in spades.
The hawks swarm the laboratory. They relentlessly attack the erasers. It is literal bird-on-wolf warfare inside a sterile clinical setting.
It creates just enough bloody chaos for the flock to physically break out of the dog crates. They fight their way down the halls. Max, Fang, Iggy, Nudge, Gazzy, and Angel, reunited.
They move as a single, highly coordinated unit. They blast through the doors, and they finally take to the open air.
And as they are flying frantically up into the sky, Jeb is down there screaming after them. He's begging Max to stay. He claims she's safe inside the school. He claims she desperately needs him to survive.
And she explicitly rejects him. It is the definitive severance of that toxic child-parent bond. She chooses to forge her own path. She actively chooses the flock over the father.
It's a crucial, necessary step in her maturation as a leader. She is no longer defining her reality by Jeb's twisted rules.
So they escape the immediate threat. They regroup high up at a mountain precipice.
They are battered, they are bleeding, they are completely exhausted, but they are finally together again. And more importantly, they have brand new intel.
Angel reveals the critical information she stealthily pulled from the scientists' minds during her captivity. She knows exactly why they were created. Or at the very least, she knows where the actual files are located.
And the records aren't at the school in California?
No, they are locked away in a secretive place called the Institute, located in New York.
New York. The Big Apple. That is a massively long flight from Death Valley.
But it gives them a tangible new heading. A purpose.
Yeah.
They aren't just aimlessly running away from danger anymore. They are actively running toward answers.
But as always with this group, there is a dark shadow hanging over this momentary victory.
The headache.
Yes. Throughout this entire deep dive, we've seen Max suffer from these randomly debilitating headaches. She pushes through them, but in the immediate aftermath of this massive escape, she actually has a full-blown seizure in midair.
She loses consciousness entirely. Fang has to dive and physically catch her before she hits the ground.
This is the ticking clock you alluded to earlier, right?
Exactly. It is heavily implied that their recombinant DNA is fundamentally unstable. They are experimental hybrids pieced together in a lab.
And experiments have expiration dates. The sudden severity of the headache heavily implies that Max's biology might literally be breaking down on a cellular level. It exponentially raises the dramatic stakes. Like, can they possibly fly to New York and find the medical answers they need before their own engineered biology turns against them and kills them?
It is terrifying. Fighting mutated wolfmen is a straightforward tactical problem. Fighting your own unspooling DNA is an entirely different nightmare. It subtly shifts the genre from survival action into a tense medical thriller.
So as we near the end here, let's synthesize what we've actually uncovered in these files. This is clearly not just a simple action story for kids. It is a deep thematic exploration of nature versus nurture versus, well, science.
It is. They were physically made by science. Cold, unfeeling, sterile test tubes and gene splicing.
But they survive in the real world because of nature. Their deeply ingrained animal instincts, their connection with the hawks, their hollow bones.
And they ultimately thrive as individuals because of nurture. The profound, undeniable love and loyalty they have cultivated for each other in the absence of real parents.
It really challenges the basic definition of what it means to be human. Jeb and those white coats in the lab, they are 100% biologically human, yet they act like absolute monsters.
While the flock is technically 2% bird, yet they consistently demonstrate significantly more empathy, self-sacrifice, and true humanity than their sophisticated creators ever do.
It's the classic Frankenstein theme playing out in a modern setting. Who is the real monster, the physically mutated creature, or the arrogant creator who tortures it?
And through all of this, it creates a fascinating, complex model of leadership. Max's authority over the flock isn't based on physical dominance or fear. It is based entirely on radical sacrifice.
She is constantly proving that she is willing to die for them. And just as importantly, she's willing to kill for them.
So the stage is thoroughly set for the next phase. The safe house is burned to ash. Jeb is revealed as a manipulative traitor. The erasers are absolutely still hunting them down.
And now they're flying cross-country to New York to break into this mysterious institute.
Oh, and Max has a voice developing in her head.
Oh, right! The voice. I can't believe we barely touched on that. As the story progresses, Max starts literally hearing a distinct voice inside her mind that gives her cryptic advice and warnings.
Is it Jeb transmitting through the microchip? Is it a side effect of her DNA unraveling? Is it early onset insanity brought on by extreme stress?
That remains one of the great unsettling mysteries setting up the next leg of their journey. It adds a thick layer of unreliability to her entire narration. Can she even trust her own mind anymore?
It's a brilliant narrative hook to keep us invested.
Okay, before we officially sign off today, I want to leave you, our listeners, with a final provocative thought. A little something to chew on as you go about your week.
Let's circle back to Jeb's grand claim in the laboratory. The test.
Right. If we assume, just for a moment, that Jeb is actually telling the truth, if this entire 4-year nightmare, the kidnapping, the brutal cages, the eraser attacks, if that was all just a highly controlled simulation designed to train them,
Then the logical question immediately becomes, what kind of catastrophic global threat is rapidly approaching that requires this extreme level of violent preparation?
exactly. If you need a savior who can fly at 10,000 feet, fight off packs of genetically modified wolves, and survive psychological torture without breaking, what exactly are you trying to save the world from?
And perhaps the even more terrifying question is, if they were specifically designed in a lab to save the world, who exactly designed the threat?
Man, that is the terrifying question. It strongly suggests that the school isn't the ultimate evil in this universe, but merely the harsh boot camp for something far, far worse.
On that rather ominous note, we are going to wrap up this incredibly deep dive into the harsh world of Maximum Ride.
It really is a fascinating case study in genetics, dubious ethics, and the sheer stubborn resilience of the human and, I suppose, avian spirit.
Thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, when things get incredibly tough down here on the ground, keep looking up.
Keep looking up.